The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom was easily one of my most anticipated games of 2024, and now that I've spent some significant time with it, I want to talk about my experience a little bit. Let me start by saying that I'm about halfway through the game, so my final thoughts on things could change, but I feel like after 10 to 15 hours of playtime, I have a pretty good grasp on what this game is all about. And my verdict on things so far is that while I think Echoes of Wisdom is a good game, and I'm enjoying my time with it overall, it's also been hard for me not to feel disappointed about my experience as well. Because while I think that Echoes of Wisdom has a lot going for it, I also think it has a very significant problem. And unfortunately, you don't have to look too far to find what that problem is. It's in the game's title. So far, I found the Echo system in Echoes of Wisdom to be woefully underwhelming, which is a major problem for this mainline Zelda game. Before I get into my gripes with the Echo system, let's talk about what Echoes of Wisdom does well, because there is a lot about this game that I've been enjoying. For one, this is easily the greatest 2D version of the Land of Hyrule that we've ever seen. For the first time in a 2D Zelda installment, the world actually feels huge. It has more geographical diversity than I was expecting, and it truly feels like a living, breathing world that you can get lost in. I've been going off the beaten path quite a bit during my time with the game, and while I feel like overall the secrets I've discovered have been a little bit on the underwhelming side, I can't deny that this is the biggest and best world that we've ever gotten in a 2D Zelda title. Unfortunately, the frame rate in the overworld is an unfathomably bad train wreck, seemingly swinging between 15 and 60 frames per second at any given moment, but I've learned to get used to it for the most part, even if it is a pretty significant damper on things. The Switch 2 cannot get here quickly enough. Echoes of Wisdom is also full of charm. I'm a little bit mixed on the whole toy aesthetic overall, and I'm not sure I want this look to continue for too long, but I've mostly enjoyed it here, and I like all the fun ways that the game plays with Zelda lore. Having both looks of Zoras represented and making one group the River Clan and the other the Sea Clan is a super fun way to bring in multiple aspects of the series' lore and tie it all together in an interesting manner. If you're a Zelda timeline nerd, then I realize that this might be breaking all sorts of laws, but that sort of thing has never particularly interested me, and I love the way that Echoes of Wisdom toys with the series' history in fun and new ways. The story here is also fairly good. It's still a 2D Zelda game at the end of the day, so it's not breaking any new ground, but the idea of rifts popping up all over Hyrule and swallowing people up and replacing them with dark imposter versions of themselves is pretty eerie and gripping stuff. I also like Zelda starting the game off as a fugitive after being framed for creating the rifts. Again, nothing too wild, but it is a unique and fresh concept that went outside of the box more than I was anticipating going into the game. The other thing that I've been very impressed with thus far is that Echoes of Wisdom has a fantastic sense of progression. Despite all my issues with the game's echo system that I will be getting into in a moment, it's still cool to find a powerful echo hidden away in a cave somewhere. But what really surprised me was the multiple other ways that you can upgrade Zelda throughout the game. The series staple Pieces of Heart are of course present here, but you can also upgrade Zelda's energy meter, as well as find various different accessories and outfits that enhance Zelda's abilities as well. This was not something I was really expecting in a 2D Zelda game, and it helps make the title feel much more modern, as well as provide a constant sense of progression. Even if you're just playing the game for 20 minutes, it's hard not to feel like you're making progress of some sort, thanks to the various different collectibles and systems at play here. But unfortunately, all the good I mentioned above has been held back considerably by the game's central mechanic, the echoes. This has been a huge bummer for me because after seeing the game's initial reveal trailer, the echo system is what I was most excited about. The idea of being able to conjure all sorts of different structures and items wherever you wanted in the overworld seemed like a natural progression for the 2D series. We would be able to again get the anything goes sandbox nature of Tears of the Kingdom, while also being able to return to the world of more traditional, tighter Zelda dungeons. I know the create your own fun of Tears of the Kingdom isn't for everyone, but personally I love it, and despite having a few reservations, I was stoked for the 2D series to go in this direction. However, 15 hours into my Echoes of Wisdom experience, and I found this aspect of the game to be very, very disappointing. One of the more common complaints about this game is how combat works. Summoning minions to fight for you is a novel idea, but it does pale in comparison to the immediate satisfaction and feedback you receive when hitting an enemy with a sword in more traditional 2D Zelda games. The game does try to rectify this a bit by giving Zelda the Sword Fighter mode, which essentially gives her Link's moveset for a set period of time, but this mode is limited by an energy gauge and is not something that can be used reliably. While Sword Fighter mode does feel great to control and is much more fun than conjuring echoes to fight for you, its inclusion in the game does feel somewhat odd to me. It's almost like the developers knew that players were going to take issue with the echo-based combat system and wanted to hedge their bet. And when you're hedging bets against your game's titular mechanic, well, that's a bit of a bad sign. I got used to summoning echoes to fight for me, but it just never feels that satisfying. I found myself using the armadillo echoes the most in combat because shooting them directly at my enemies felt the most like a traditional Zelda projectile. But whenever I had to summon a monster and just wait around for them to kill an enemy for me, it just never felt interactive enough and, at least in my eyes, felt weirdly out of place in a Zelda title. But as disappointing as I found the game's combat thus far, I've been even more disappointed with how the game implements echoes in its exploration and traversal. I had big expectations going in of having a sandbox similar to what we had with Tears of the Kingdom. I was of course expecting a miniature version of that, but I still expected to be able to flex my creative muscles and find all sorts of crazy solutions to a bunch of different problems in the same way that I've been able to in the most recent 3D Zelda game. At least at this point in time for me though, that feeling has been missing from Echoes of Wisdom. While it's true that Zelda does amass a staggering amount of echoes to use over the course of her adventure, I found myself mostly just cycling through the same 4 or 5 of them. If I need to defeat an enemy and I'm out of sword fighter energy, I'm probably just shooting an armadillo at them, or summoning a dark nut to make short work of them. If I need to get to higher ground, then I'm probably going to throw together a couple of water blocks and swim up, or stack 4 beds together into a makeshift staircase. It's fun to do these things at first, but when you realize that progressing through the game is basically just an endless cycle of summoning these 3 or 4 different echoes, it makes the game feel significantly less creative and open-ended than I was hoping for. And sure, maybe this is partially a me problem, and I should be challenging myself to find more creative solutions to the game's puzzles and combat, but I also believe it's the game's job to force the player into finding those solutions, especially when the game is built around that system. And my last complaint here, good lord, cycling through and selecting echoes is an absolute mess. Like I said before, Zelda gets a massive list of echoes pretty quickly into the adventure, and from there on out, selecting which echo you want to use starts to feel like a significant chore. I know before I said I've been compelled to use only a handful of echoes in my adventure, and part of that is just how tedious it is to cycle through your list of options. Holding right on the D-pad brings up your list of echoes, and from there your only option is to scroll through them one by one and select the one you want from there. Sure, there are a couple different ways to organize that bar, such as by last learned or last used echo, but it's still an incredibly slow and archaic way to handle this sort of thing, especially when this is the game's central mechanic. The fact that there's no real option for a grid menu or a favorites list is insane. Being able to assign 5 of your favorite echoes to a shortcut menu seems like such an easy feature to implement here and will go a long way in alleviating this issue. Anyway, those are my main gripes with the game's ecosystem. I'm still enjoying my time with Echoes of Wisdom, and I plan to see the adventure through to the end, but at this point in time, it's hard not to be disappointed with the title's central concept. And when it's the central concept of the game that seems to be so plagued with issues, it's hard for that not to bring down the entire experience. There's still a fun Zelda game to be had here, but thus far, Echoes of Wisdom is failing to meet the lofty expectations I have for the series. Hopefully that changes by the end of my playthrough.